Hi, everyone. My name is Andy Szanger, Director of Corporate Sales at CDW, and today I'm joined by David Dobson of Intel and Greg Buzek of IHL Group. Last year at NRF, David joined me to speak about how retailers can prepare for an uncertain future. A year later, I'm joined by these two panelists to explore new research about current retail realities and how these findings can help inform future success. So, really excited to be here today. Greg, I know that you and Intel have been doing a ton of research on the current state of retail, and I'd love to hear a little bit about what you've been, what you guys have uncovered.
Sure, Andy. Hey, thanks for having me, everybody, today. Well, current state of retail, is booming if you're in the United States, and it's up and down in most other places of the world. And we're going to show some data that reflects all of that things going on. But because of multiple levels of stimulus in the United States, retail sales have been growing really double digits all year for this year, and that's continued through the holidays here. So let's go back a little bit, though, and talk about what led to the growth. Well, the pandemic led to the growth, and there's been a massive change in the way people shop around the world. Prior to the pandemic, at most, we saw about 10% of essential retail that was being spent online. That is close to 37% now worldwide, with the lowest numbers being in North America and the highest numbers being in Asia and Latin and South America. Basically, in a 3 month period, we saw a 10-year organic growth in 3 months of time because of the pandemic. So 10 years of growth in 3 months of time that just blew out what was going on in retail. Now, when it came to sophistication, Europe was and Asia were further ahead than North America there. But when this thing started, we thought, the experience is so poor. Will it stay? Will people continue to shop online for click and collect if they've got to wait for a delivery time or a pickup time, et cetera, for that? If they've got to compete at midnight to get that slot? And we felt maybe only about 45% of those new journeys would continue going forward. However, since the pandemic is now going on to its second year now, we're seeing people stick with these new customer journeys. And as a result, that is changing behavior and how retailers need to react. Now, Europe, as I mentioned, is ahead. They've been doing click and collect and local delivery from stores for years. In the United States, it's actually bifurcating. It's changing by region. So, for instance, in the Northeast, one of the things that's happening is people are reserving products and willing to pay for products, particularly clothing, to go to the store, try it on, and return it in one trip. That is the big issue that we're facing with clothes, is the fact that the sizing and the return process is still convoluted. When you get to the South, the people in the South, they want their groceries delivered. People in the Midwest, they want to go to the store more now that things have opened up. And then the customers on the West Coast are more likely to do click and collect and pick up their groceries on a schedule than they are to have those delivered. So those are some of the things that are happening, and those are things that, quite honestly, are here to stay. It's not going away. So it's not a matter of will retailers shop or will customers shop in store or will they shop online? The answer is both.
Hey, Greg, that's so fascinating. I always feel like I should be taking notes whenever I kind of listen to you speak. And I've heard all this stuff before, but it's still fascinating to me, the insights coming out of this study. So thanks for kind of leading the discussion today. I guess my first question, just in terms of the data that you and the study findings, is kind of what's the impact of different income levels, within the survey respondents? How's that playing out in terms of those customer journeys and some of the research findings?
Yeah, it's interesting. Generally, the higher the incomes, the more suburban or what we call ex-urban now you are, and the issues are more to do with, do they have the product in stock? Do they have my size in stock? The lines are too long. As you get to lower incomes, the issue is often, is the security in my neighborhood good enough for me to go to the store or have packages delivered there? So it's kind of like first world issues when it comes to the things going on. And those security issues are more pronounced in Asia and Latin and South America as well, for lower income. So there is certainly an income disparity, But the biggest complaints, the higher the incomes, are simply lack of product on the shelves or the lines being too long.
Hey, Greg, I know that over the last year, we've seen a very large shift in the way that some consumers want to buy their products. Would you say that you've seen, what areas of the customer journey are seeing the most growth?
Well, we saw massive growth in these digital journeys, particularly click and collect and local delivery that occurred during that time. And what we found here now, going into 2022, in this consumer study that we did with Intel, is that things are starting to level out. These journeys that had these rocket ship type growth are now starting to even out there. In fact, when you look at essential retailing, customers are going back to the stores a little bit more and reducing the digital footprint just slightly. So essentials being groceries, health and beauty, and home goods. They're going back to the stores as a preference because issues with substitutions, for instance, on those online orders, you can make that decision in the store very, very quickly. That's a back and forth that often occurs when you're doing it online. In clothing, we're actually seeing a greater movement back to the stores, as I mentioned, due to the fact that the sizing is not consistent across retailers and the return process is very convoluted. So we're seeing people go back to the stores here in the US. And as you notice here, in terms of pickup or delivery, they're staying rather consistent. So once again, there was these big ramp ups in terms of how you wanted to work with your retailers for these different types of products, but it's now staying rather consistent there. The only difference that we're seeing is around the world, we're seeing Asia and LATAM be more likely to pay for pickup and pay for delivery of products. Whereas in North America as well as Europe, it's more likely that people for delivery have joined a membership like Amazon Prime or Walmart's service or Kroger or Target so that they get free delivery. So they pay that membership fee to get that free delivery. In other parts of the world, they're willing to pay that fee for that delivery, and they're actually increasing their spend in those categories. So I'll turn it over to David. David, what are you seeing?
Yeah, great. I think, you described it really well. I think it came through loud and clear in the study. From a retailer's perspective, it's not a store versus digital. You've got to have an integrated offer in for your shoppers. You got to provide, and we've been saying this for a little while now, but I don't think there's any more hesitation from retailers in terms of their priorities. They've got to be able to provide those goods and services, to their shoppers in the way they want to purchase them, how and when they want to purchase them, and they need to get them to them in the way they want to pick up those products. So it could be a traditional store visit, it could be a 1 hour delivery, it could be that locker that I'm going to walk past on my commute. However they want to get those goods and services through whatever channel, and that integrated offer is super important. Now, having said all that, I think one of the things that we're seeing is, and I'm sure you're seeing it as well, Greg, is that kind of multi-channel, omni-channel, however you want to call it, the fulfillment of those non-store goods and items. That's kind of coming at a cost to the retailer. There's definitely an impact in terms of margin loss. We've seen many different numbers, and obviously it varies from retailer to retailer, but in the area of 8 to 15 points of margin can be hit in some of these categories by having to do the online fulfillment. They got very efficient over many years of that factory to warehouse to distribution center to store, and then me as a shopper going to the store to fulfill. That's still the most efficient way of delivering products to the shopper. Unfortunately, that's not what the shopper wants or expects, and a lot of businesses are being challenged, especially by the online businesses, to provide all of those new offers. So there's definitely an area of investment for these businesses to look at that online fulfillment. And we're seeing that as the people who are able to do that at least impact, providing an area of differentiation. So to meet these challenges, what we're seeing retailers do is three major investments. First is around creating dedicated inventory through micro fulfillment centers, areas of the distribution center, a dedicated supply chain warehousing fulfillment options. The second thing we're seeing them do is look at the store as a way of fulfilling. Some retailers are creating points within the store that can do that fulfillment. Other retailers are just doing some creative options around that in-store fulfillment. And then the third area of investment is automation. Anything that retailers can do to automate in that space is going to also create efficiencies. That's the three priority investments that we're seeing. Are you seeing something similar, Andy, or something different?
I agree, David. I think, we're seeing a big need for retailers to begin automating processes, like adding, like checkout and updating pricing, a lot of different areas of the store. But what I think is clear is that some of the top performing retailers are making strategic investments in technology, and they're seeing returns as a result to it. When I look back at last year, I think, or the beginning of this year, that is, one of the big things that was top of everyone's mind is how do I bring the customer back to the store, right? And how do I create a customer experience that makes that customer want to come back to the store? And we talked about that a lot last year at NRF. But I think, as the year went on, a lot of things shifted a little bit. And retailers quickly realized that customers were coming back, but how do they now account for some of the labor shortage issues, that they're running into as a result of it? And as a result of that, customer experience was starting to suffer, and retailers needed to adjust a little bit. And Greg, I know that IHL Group did a lot of research on that with Intel, and I'm not sure if you want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you found.
Yeah, so one of the things that is radically changed in the last 4 years is we've right-sized several segments, like soft goods and department stores, where we've seen a dramatic reduction in the number of stores, but we've seen a dramatic increase in things like restaurants, fast food in particular, but grocery stores, mass merchants, dollar stores, stores that require often more employees in there. So this labor shortage that we're seeing is here to stay, and retailers need to adjust for that. Right now in the United States, the data is showing about 4.3 million workers short in retail for the store jobs. Well, those people are now working at Amazon. They're working for DoorDash, Instacart, Uber Eats, and Postmates. Those jobs are gone. So retailers need to figure out, how do I optimize my operations? How do I lower the cost associated with those digital journeys, particularly the ones with store fulfillment, and leverage technology that can reduce labor, like self-checkout, allowing customers to shop for themselves and pay with their phone, their digital signage like electronic shelf labels, mobile devices, so that the people they have working the store are fully enabled to get the orders and serve the customers as necessary there. How do they do that? And a lot of that has to do with technology. So major issues with labor shortage, that's here to stay. It's not going away, and retailers need to adjust by adding technologies to the retail stores. But the issue is not only at the store, David. I mean, it's a problem in the IT department, it's a problem in supply chain, all of those things.
Oh yeah, for sure, and it's not limited. I know we're at NRF here, and we're in the in the US, but this is a global issue, and we talk about the actual numbers of people missing, but the right skills in the right locations, and there's stories of people leaving their jobs in supply chain, delivery, or truck drivers. Right, we know there's a huge shortage in that space. In the UK, as a great example, one of the retailers was offering 2 times the wage they were offering for their truckers that were working directly for them to their competitors, just to try and bring people over. And that was driving a shortage of taxis in London, because everyone's just scrabbling for those employees, and that's obviously driving wages up, and that's driving the interest in automation, as you rightly said. I mean, Andy, what's your thoughts in this area? I know CDW have done a lot of work here, especially around the store side.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to what retailers can be doing from a technology perspective, there's so many things that can help enable retailers to offset some of the challenges associated with the labor shortages. For instance, one of the big challenges for years has been the time-consuming task of updating shelf pricing in a store. Over the last few years, there's been a lot of talk about electronic shelf labeling, but the cost of that has been a little bit prohibitive. Now that the price is coming down on that technology, and then you combine that and overlay that to the increasing concerns around labor shortages, there's a really compelling case in many cases to actually move into a more digital mode. There's other things. Self checkout obviously eliminates a lot of the labor pain points and bottlenecks as well. There's also the use of camera technology to help you understand when you are starting to see some of those bottlenecks in the store. So how do you know when a customer has been dwelling too long in an area of the store or at the checkout, and you can deploy that staff in a more efficient way instead of just blanketing the store blindly. So there's a lot of different things around analytics that can help with that as well. And we're seeing a lot of customers really take advantage of some of those strategic investments in those areas. Um, the other thing is really optimizing the digital journey. And Greg, and I know that IHL Group is looking into that a lot and found some really interesting things in that area as well. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're seeing some retailers doing, and especially where the high performing retailers are really investing, I guess?
Sure. Yeah, and I think you hit on it with an example with electronic shelf labels. That's a 20-year-old technology that's now an overnight success because of COVID. It truly is. We've been trying to push electronic shelf labels forever, but the unions, particularly the UCFW, is probably the strongest union in the United States, has pushed back about that because it costs jobs and those people changing prices on the shelf. COVID blew that out. The labor shortages that we're facing, all of a sudden, the opportunity is there. So we're seeing 843% growth in the use of shelf labels among the leading retailers there. So that for two reasons. One, to reduce the labor associated with that and optimize where their scarce label is going. But two, it allows them to dynamically price with some of the online competitors there as well. So that's just one of the things that is allowing people to optimize these journeys. And generally, what we found, retailers have reported that they can get about 70% of that lost margin back through optimization, through systems and processes so far. The goal is to figure out how do they get some of that revenue back that's missing in the digital journeys, like impulse purchases and things like that, that are missing, that they get the benefit of when a customer walks into the store, which can enhance the revenue enough to cover all of those costs. So, what are some of the areas where the people are investing in a big way and the winners are investing? The big one right now is removing labor from the pickup process and the order selection process for online orders. And how retailers are doing that is they're carving out 10 to 20% of their floor space and putting in an automated distribution center, sort of like a mini Amazon, in their store, floor to ceiling, with the top 5 to 10,000 items that are ordered online. It has a dedicated inventory and one where you don't have to compete with a shopper walking in to pull that item from the shelf. So you eliminate all that disconnect when a shopper's walking through the aisle and says, "Oh, they don't have what you ordered. It might have been there, but another person took it while they walked through the aisle." It eliminates all of that issue, and that's just a giant margin suck. So 411% growth from the leading retailers in terms of deploying this kind of technology, because it level sets that piece of it and makes it more like you're shipping from a warehouse. The other area is removing friction at the checkout and removing labor from the checkout process. Self checkout, 178% increase in self checkout spend in the next 2 years for the food, drug, and mass merchant segments there. The next thing, though, is the consumer checking themselves out with their phone. My favorite application is the Sam's Scan and Go app. I can go in at the busiest time of day there, walk in the store, pick out the items I want, and go right to the door, and I'm gone. I don't have to stand in any lines. It's wonderful, and that opportunity is really what customers want, is the ability to get in and out of the stores. And then the last technology, which has grown really due to COVID, is the whole contactless payment. So the tap and pay. So you don't have to use a PIN, you don't have to do a signature. You just tap and pay with your either your phone or your card. That's greatly removing the friction, and it's increasing the speed of transactions as you go through theirs. Um, Another thing is what winners are already doing, and one of the key areas is winners are far more likely, 2 times more likely, to already have updated their point of sale systems. And the big trend there is that people are going to go to a single set of code that works across their mobile POS, their traditional point of sale, whether it works on a phone format or on a tablet format. It can link into the pickup orders. It allows a retailer to the consumer to add items to an order that might be an online order, be able to add those items in real time. So the winning retailers have that flexibility and have made that change to do that. And so all of that is just creating all kinds of opportunities with technology purchases. And with that, I'm sure at CDW and Intel, you guys are seeing things growing like crazy. So what about you, David? You seeing different formats growing faster than others?
I think we said this last year, Greg, and I think it's going to hold for 2022 as well. Flexibility is key in this space. I mean, you just described different checkout processes that are going to appeal to different people. Me, like you, I love using my phone to just go in, get the 3 items I want to get and go. But if I'm pushing a trolley, or if I've got a little one with me, maybe my phone's not going to work for me. Maybe I'm going to need a different checkout process, but I still don't want to be stuck in a checkout lane. And I still don't want it to be a difficult process for me to go through that. So I think there's choice, and that means flexibility from the retailer, and that's really driving that need for, as you rightly said, that software platform in the store, which is traditionally POS, that needs to be able to cover all of those, because you don't want different business rules in your mobile app to in your self-checkout to in your traditional point of sale. It's got to look seamless to the customer, and really there's the winners have been working on that platform for a number of years. So that's clearly important. And I know you mentioned automation earlier. Some people, when we were talking about automation before COVID, they'll kind of go, yeah, but like you said, with labor unions, it was, that's just about replacing people. But it's not today. It's about, yes, there are some jobs that were previously done by people that you just can't get those people to do anymore because of shortages. But there's also, you want those people really to be focused on the high productive, where people are really good, which is in front of the customer. It is serving the customer in those customer service facing roles. And so there's a shift in terms of where resources are allocated, and automation is helping to get that right person in the right place. You nailed the checkout process. In all the surveys I've seen for my 20 plus years working in this POS and retail space, your checkout process is always high up on the list of frustration areas for shoppers. And self-checkout has helped to a large degree, but there's no doubt that's also driven some loss prevention issues, and retailers are investing in technology there to kind of help them to keep that process that people like, that checkout process that the shoppers like, but let's get a handle on some of this loss that started to come through that approach and that channel as well. And I guess the final thing, and just some of the stuff that you were talking about there was reminding me of, there's a very famous retailer here in the UK where I live, and they used to have this strapline of "every little helps," and it's not about one technology that solves all your problems. It's about those incremental investments. It's about doing some piece here, doing a piece there, adding your shelf edge labels, reorganizing your store for those fulfillment centers. It's kind of doing all of those things right in very small increments that really gets you to success. So that's what I'm seeing a lot of those smart retailers doing, not ripping out their stores, but just kind of doing those smart changes and to realign their technologies. Andy, you seeing something similar? I know from a technology perspective, it's a big priority for CDW in terms of this modernization of the store specifically. And you want to talk a little bit about what you guys are doing there?
Yeah, absolutely, David. I agree. I mean, checkout modernization is something that we are hearing from almost every retailer we speak to. A couple of the things that are never going away and are always going to be at the top of a retailer's mind is that customer experience, right? And how do I improve that customer experience? And these days, obviously, as we spoke about, employee productivity is more important than ever. And that checkout modernization process is really the foundational piece to making sure you can bring that all together. And when we're looking at it and speaking to our customers, the three main things that we really focus on and hear repeatedly as areas of priority are connectivity, application performance, and the actual POS. The connectivity piece is one is just foundational, right? If you don't have the right bandwidth or connection to your data and information, there's no way anything else that you put on top of that, can be effective. And so whether we're talking about Wi-Fi, either for your customer's experience or for your coworker, your store associate's experience, whether we're talking about the WAN connectivity back to headquarters, or even 5G for pop-ups or redundancy purposes. It all has to be functioning in order to actually connect back to your information. Application performance can include things like edge computing, making sure you have the power at the edge, but also making sure your applications are modernized, right? Greg was speaking earlier about the fact that people are moving to platforms that could be transported from a stationary POS to a mobile POS. And can your applications withstand that? And also be future-proof and be able to be upgraded to new functionality and features as they move forward. And lastly, of course, the POS, whether that's actual physical cash wrap station or whether that we're talking about mobility. Adding things such as contactless payments is becoming more and more important, both from an efficiency perspective and a health and safety perspective. More and more retailers are moving away from cash, right? You don't want to be transmitting potential illnesses, but also it can also be a much more efficient transaction when the technology is right. So we're seeing that as retailers embark on these journeys to modernize that checkout process, it really addresses a lot of the current challenges and also builds a foundation for future upgrades. No matter what you do in the store, whether you start looking at things down the road like self-checkout, looking into kiosks, whether it be even electronic shelf labeling like we spoke about, you need to have a solid network in place to do that. And when you start speaking and thinking about checkout modernization, this gives you that core foundation to move forward with some of the other projects that you'd be looking at in the future. So, David, I get so excited about some of the stuff. I could talk all day, but I know we've been talking for a while now, and I think we're getting close to the end of our time here. So I'd love to, before we, start to wrap up, is maybe hear a little bit of your final thoughts and what else is, what didn't we talk about today, David?
Yeah, it does fly by these sessions. It always amazes me. I don't know who's on the clock, but we've probably already burst our time limit. I think I'll leave you with two thoughts. I think, the best retailers are still and will continue to put that customer experience at the center of everything they do from this digital transformation perspective. And to do that, they've really got to understand that customer and understand their operations. And the key to that is the data they capture about within their business and how they use and leverage that data and turn that data into, insights and then to action. So I think that's still, it's probably something we would have said a couple of years back, and it's still true today. And they're still looking for more improvements in that area. And that's kind of one area we didn't really talk too much about today, but that's kind of touches on how do retailers understand what they really need to do inside their business. And then I think the other change that I've seen over the last 2 years, that the things they had to do last year at pace when this pandemic first hit has kind of changed the appetite of the way in which some retailers are looking at some of this digital transformation or looking at how they can deploy some of this technology. And certainly the expectations of how fast technology can be deployed inside the business and within the retail operations side of the business, it's changed, right? I don't think retailers are looking at these multi-year, let's sit down and think about what we need to do, and then let's go out and look at the marketplace, and then let's have a deep analysis on all of the various systems and solutions that we'll need to change, and then let's go do a little test in an office somewhere, and then find a little test store that we can go trial this stuff in, and then we'll do a limited pilot and extend that, and 3 years later, you're finally deploying that technology in a store. I think last year, stuff was, as Greg was talking about, stuff was deployed in weeks or months at the longest. And I think there's an appetite for retailers to do that more within the innovations that we're talking about here. And that's really driving a new thought process and also a new pace at which this technology is now expected to be deployed within these major retailers. So I know we didn't talk about either of those two areas today, but just kind of my final thoughts on some additional points really for the market.
Yeah, no, thanks, David. And I think ultimately one of the big things that retailers need to do is they need to step back and really think about and understand what they're trying to solve for or achieve in the first place, right? Make sure that you understand where are your customers going, where do you want to meet them, and make sure that you're addressing those needs and assessing where you are in that journey. How are you going to be approaching managing lines in the peak holiday season? How are your associates spending their time? Are they being efficient with the use of their time? When you have less employees and store associates, you need to make sure that you're maximizing, the use of their time and really evaluating how you're spending that time. And technology can certainly enable that. I think also one of the things that retailers need to be doing right now is taking a look back over the last 2 years, or as Greg mentioned very early on, there was a lot of innovation that took place. I think it was something like 10 years worth of innovation has taken place over the last 2 years. And really, in some cases, those projects were implemented very fast out of need. And really going back now and reevaluating those technology enhancements that were put in place at the time, making sure that they really are future-proof and done in a way that's sustainable and growable and scalable. There's no question that multi-channel is the future, and helping to meet our customers on that journey and enhance that experience is really where the future is. So with that being said, Greg, want to thank you again for being here. IHL Group is a great partner to CDW. We appreciate all of the insights that you always provide us. And David, of course, Intel, phenomenal technology partner for CDW as well. And, I think we could all go on about the future of retail and the impact of multi-channel, for hours here, but we are out of time. So I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you to everyone who is listening in on our conversation today. We'd love to continue the conversation with you on both CDW and Intel's Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn pages. So we hope to see you there. And thank you for joining us.